I stumbled upon my ex-wife's old phone while she was moving. I let her know that I had found it and asked if she wanted it back. She gave me the go-ahead to throw it away. I got curious about why it was hidden in an old purse. After charging it up, I connected it to my laptop and started going through the files. To my surprise, there were several video clips that I didn't recognize. During our marriage, she never made videos, only took pictures. These videos ranged from 30 seconds to 3 minutes. What I saw was shocking, but not entirely unexpected. They featured my wife with different guys. I could identify one video from a girls' night she had a few months ago, where she was with 2 younger guys. There were others showing her engaged in BJ or having closeness. It started to make sense why she would leave at odd times or come home late from a friend's place. Consequently, I felt compelled to get a DNA test to ensure that my children were actually biologically mine. Now for the update. My oldest son and youngest daughter are a perfect match to my DNA. However, my middle son shares some similarities, but not an exact match. There are resemblances, but not identical. She has no idea that I went ahead with the DNA test, and she denies any and all allegations of infidelity. So I decided to approach my best friend's wife, who was hanging out and going out with my ex during that period. Surprisingly, she confirmed that my ex did have closeness with another man around the time our youngest child was conceived. It happened after a baseball game when we were getting ready to go home, but were invited to stay for drinks. I was exhausted, and the baby was fussy, so I decided to go home and left my ex with my best friend's wife to have a few drinks. That's when I found out that my ex had a major crush on my cousin. They had a few drinks, and as the night went on, the crowd dwindled, and it got later. Eventually, it was just my ex, my cousin, and her friend remaining. My friend mentioned she needed to grab something from the field and went back to get it. When she returned, she couldn't find my ex or cousin. She checked his truck but found nothing, except she noticed the truck was slightly moving. Curious, she peeked into the bed of the truck and discovered them passionately making out. His hand was under her shirt. My friend tried to stay hidden and quickly ran under the bleachers. They sat up, and he pulled her to the edge of the tailgate. She mentioned he started doing it with her while she struggled with his zipper. My ex made a comment saying, "Duck," after pulling out his tool, commenting that his cousin isn't nowhere that big. She asked him about his skin because she had never seen it before. She gave him BJ for a few minutes before standing up and bending over into his truck bed. He entered her and started having intercourse at a decent pace. My friend was both shocked and turned on by what she witnessed. She noticed that my ex was really enjoying it based on her moaning and how she responded to him. She mentioned that my cousin was no short guy. They both reached their climax, and he left a few drops on her pants. She even gave them to him as a keepsake. After getting dressed, my friend headed back to her car. When my ex finally returned, she asked where they had been. My ex replied that they had been walking around the baseball field. The timing of that incident aligns with the conception of my son, which would explain why our genetic profiles don't match. Do you have any advice or suggestions for me? Second story. Let me give you some background first. When I first met my soon-to-be ex-wife, she would often bring up her ex-boyfriend. On our very first date, she received a call from him demanding that she pay her share of the phone bill or he would cut her off. She used to tell me stories about how he mistreated her. He was a heavy drinker, couldn't hold a steady job, constantly offended her, and she despised him, wanting him out of her life forever. Fast forward, we got married, and I still remember the joy I felt holding her hand and placing the wedding ring on her finger. I recall her whispering, "Ow," when I realized I was gripping her hands too tightly during the ceremony. I did everything for her. She didn't have a driver's license, so I would always pick her up from work. On my off days, I would also take her to work. She often asked me for money to buy marijuana, which I couldn't use due to my military service. Whenever she needed cigarettes, I would buy her 2 packs, even though she said 1 was enough. I have vivid memories of gently stroking her hair behind her ear and feeling a sense of peace. On the day we got married, I removed her from her ex's phone plan and put her on mine. She never contributed anything, not for gas, rent, Wi-Fi, or the phone bill, nothing at all. I even drove from Virginia to New York in just 9 hours, fueled by caffeine and Adderall, so she could see her family after years of being apart. I enabled her to live her life. I did my best to help her become a responsible person and get her back on track. She thought she owed $2,000 in student loans, but later we discovered that due to her long-standing default, the amount had skyrocketed to $22,000. I told her that when the time came, I would support her with that. A couple of days before her birthday in December, I noticed that she was trying to hide a texting app from me. She texted me and asked me to take her to the emergency room, where she was diagnosed with the flu. That night, while she was sleeping under the influence of pills, I took her phone and went through it. I saw a text to her ex, expressing how much she missed him and that they wanted to meet up again. I became furious, and for the first time in our entire relationship, I raised my voice at her the next morning before heading to work. She promised that it didn't mean anything, apologized for hiding it, and swore she was completely done with him. I was foolish to believe her, but we made up and moved forward. A few days later, I still felt guilty for doubting her, so I was driving her around to take care of things before her birthday, paying for her nails and hair to be done, and so on. I checked my banking app and noticed that on her account, we had separate accounts. I was a joint owner on hers, but she wasn't on mine. There were 2 Uber charges and a charge at a 7-Eleven near her ex's place. I asked her what the Uber charges were for, and she immediately got defensive, claiming they were for getting a friend home, and that sometimes the location shows up as near his place when it's actually near hers. I was once again foolish to believe her, but I became more cautious. I asked her to look me in the eyes and promised that she hadn't been to his place, and she swore she hadn't. Later that day, I asked her if she could show me her Uber history, and she became even more defensive, accusing me of being paranoid, just like her ex. I investigated and discovered from her Uber history that she did indeed go to his place. I confronted her calmly with the knowledge that I knew she went there, but instead of having a calm conversation, she flew into a rage and demanded to know why I went through her history, expressing that she wanted a divorce. We didn't speak for about a week, but eventually we reconciled, and she swore to me that nothing happened during her visit to his place. Between then and last week, things seemed fine between us, although I noticed that she was briefly friends with him on Facebook. I asked her to block him, and she did, but I knew that when you block or unblock someone, posts that you're tagged in reappear momentarily, which kept happening and then disappearing again. I even recall a day when I asked to see her blocked list while we were parked, and she got out of the car, went behind it, and came back in to show me the list. I can't believe I didn't say anything, and I can't believe she thought I was naive enough to fall for that. However, everything changed last week. After the incident in December, I activated parental controls on my phone account and added a tracker so I could see her whereabouts every day. She was unaware of it because she always expressed dislike for anyone tracking her location, just like her ex used to do, but she gave me a reason to do it. After finishing a 24-hour shift between Friday and Saturday, I texted her to see what she was up to and went home. She wasn't responding to any of my texts, so I checked the tracker. She was at her ex's place. I immediately jumped out of bed, frantically searched for my clothes, and rushed over there, hoping to confront her. She claimed that she had gone out the previous night with a friend and was staying over at her friend's place. Not the ex. I knew the friend. I'll never forget the moment she stepped out. I was leaning against a tree outside his apartment, waiting, and called her to tell her that she needed to come home immediately so we could spend the day together to make up for me working 24 hours on Valentine's Day. The first thing I did was yell, "Staying over at a friend's place, huh?" And she screamed, "Duck." She asked me for a ride home, swearing that nothing happened and that she just wanted to see him. I demanded the keys to the apartment and her ring right away. I gave her until Thursday to return the phone I had paid for, and I never asked for a cent back. Later on, she admitted that something did happen, and it had also happened back in December. I was completely devastated. She told me the reason for her cheating was that she was no longer attracted to me, mentioning something like, "I was with him for 3 years, and he does things to my body that I can't even explain." She even made a comment about not liking the way I smelled, which contradicted what she had always told me before. So that whole situation was really confusing. She claimed she stopped being attracted to me after her encounter in December and said she lost attraction to herself and me. I kind of figured out that she lied about the smell thing and couldn't admit that she was more attracted to him than me. However, she did mention that she liked how I cared about her and held her hand all the time. Later, her ex sent me a message on Facebook with just XD. That was all. I kept texting her, continuously telling her that I forgive her and want to have a life together. But she kept refusing, saying that I deserve someone better and that she's trash. I know she has a tendency to engage in self-harm, so when she calls herself trash, it's her way of trying to feel better about herself in a twisted way. I haven't brought up getting back together since then because now I don't want her back anymore. Our lives are pretty much completely separate now. She never lived with me, so she's either staying with her ex or at the place she used to be at. I have the phone back, and I'm working on removing myself as a joint owner of her account. I can still track her spending, and even though she got paid $600 on Thursday, she is already overdrawn as of today, mostly due to Ubers to and from work and probably on food and MJ. I just don't know how to feel about any of this. I thought I would be the one to help her overcome her issues in a way. I did everything for her, never laid a hand on her, never raised my voice. I always tried to push her to become a better person. She used to tell me that I was a better person than her ex. Now I don't know what to believe anymore. I think I'm over it, but I'm not entirely sure. I don't have any feelings for her anymore. And if she asks to come back, I'm going to say no. All I want is that 3 a.m. call when she's drunk, admitting she messed up, apologizing, and begging me to come back just so I can turn her down. But even having that thought makes me question if I'm really over it. How do I know for sure if I'm over this? I have an update to the post I made yesterday. I actually contacted her one more time. A friend informed me that she changed her Facebook relationship status to widowed. So I messaged her saying, I'm not dead, what the heck? I also sent her a picture of a letter I received stating that our tax return was completely used to pay off her student loans. I'm planning to visit the IRS sometime this week to get my share back. Third story. Let's dive into the background of this story. I'm a 27-year-old guy who, like many others, grew up believing that there's one perfect person out there for me. You know, the whole soulmate thing. When I was 19, I met a woman named Bree. We were introduced through mutual friends while I was serving in the Army. Bree was adorable, had a unique personality, and seemed like a genuinely good person. One of her friends, let's call her Sam, thought it would be a great idea for us to be a couple. I'm not exactly sure why she thought that, but I was attracted to Bree, and she seemed interested in me too. Bree was visiting Sam for a few days, and I had just returned from a leave in my hometown, so it was inevitable that we would meet. We all went out for lunch together, me, Bree, Sam, and Sam's husband, who we'll call Jim. The meetup wasn't anything extraordinary, but once Bree flew back home, she messaged me on Facebook, and we really hit it off. So here's the story. After about 3 weeks of talking to Bree, she hit me with a really strange question. She asked, "What would you do if I were pregnant?" Now let's do some quick calculations here. Bree was in her wild party phase and had multiple partners. I found that out much later in the relationship. She had a boyfriend just a month before we met. Now, I was adopted, so accepting a child as my own didn't seem like a big deal to me. My answer was what seemed like the right thing to say. I will love that child as if it were my own. Well, it turns out she was showing a lot of signs of being pregnant. About a week later, she took a pregnancy test, and it came back positive. I stood by my word. I was ready to take care of this kid. However, there was a 3-month gap between this revelation and when she decided to fly out to be with me. During the time, she was really flaky, trying to see if the guy she thought was the father would step up and help her take care of the child. But he never did. So she chose me instead. Looking back now, I understand why staying with her was a terrible idea. I was naive, deeply in love, and I genuinely believed she was the one and that things would eventually work out. I even married her so that the Army would cover the birth expenses, thinking everything would be fine. But we all know it didn't turn out that way. Okay, let me break it down for you. It was our 2nd year of marriage when I started noticing something weird. There was this guy, let's call him Ron, who was liking and commenting on every post she made, especially the ones with our daughter in them. It raised some red flags. By this point, I had left the military and was working a security job. One night while I was working at a nightclub, my instincts kicked in and I had this gut feeling. Now, I'm not the type to act on mere suspicion. I needed solid evidence. Since I would finish my shift around 4 in the morning and she would be asleep, I saw an opportunity. Every night, she would leave her laptop on the living room couch downstairs before going to bed. So here's the plan. I get home, head to the couch, and there it is. The laptop. I take a guess at the password and, lo and behold, it's our daughter's birth year. I go straight to her Facebook and check her messages. And there it is. 6 months worth of conversation with this guy named Ron. Some of the messages are flirtatious, and they even talk about how useless and inferior of a man I am. But the worst part was when I discovered that she believes he's the biological father and she's trying to involve him in our lives. I keep scrolling until I can't handle it anymore. I grab the laptop, take it upstairs, and place it in front of her with the screen glaring at her face. As she slowly wakes up, I tell her, "We're discussing this in the morning." And I walk back downstairs. Normally, she wakes up around 7, but she didn't come down until 9. I guess she was hoping I would be asleep on the couch. When she finally confronts me, she tries to brush it off as just friendly talk and claims it's not technically cheating. I call bullcrap on that and make it clear that if I ever see something like this again, I'm out of here. Now, when I said if, deep down, I knew it was more like when. That's when I put my plan into action. I made the decision to drop out of college and find a job in my field. I made sure that any credit accounts or assets were in her name. I started talking about how my hometown had a better economy and how we would be better off there. It took 2 years of persuasion, but eventually she bought into the idea. Nothing was in my name, and in 6 months, we were set to move to my hometown. We arrived in May, and the following month, I sent her back home to visit. I knew exactly what she would do and who she would do it with. There was a guy we met through Sam the day before we left, and I could tell right away that she was interested in him. 3 weeks after her visit, she started acting strange again, prioritizing other things over me, postponing things, and growing distant. You see, I spent 2 years setting up the pieces, and now it was time to let her knock them over. I made sure I had no job, no assets, and I was back home where I could rely on my family. I pushed her until she admitted to cheating, and that's when everything fell apart. I cut off all the funds going into our joint account and emptied it to file for divorce. Since I had nothing, she couldn't take half of it. I didn't have a job, so what kind of lifestyle did we have that would require me to pay her alimony? Everything was in her name, so even though I had some financial responsibilities, the divorce dragged on long enough to ruin her credit. I gave her everything and made many sacrifices to raise her child, but in the end, she lost the most. I'm doing really well in my career, and people appreciate what I bring to the table. Marriage isn't really on my radar, but I have plenty of women who are interested in me. Life is pretty great. I still stay in touch with the daughter, and Bree sometimes tries to flirt with me in hopes of getting me back. I'm the only father figure the kid has known, and I have no plans to walk away from that role. Even though it's emotionally tempting to get back together with her to spend more time with the child, I know it's not the best decision. I have better options, and I know better than to go down that path again. Fourth story. We've been married for 7 years and together for a total of 17 years. We have 2 wonderful kids, a 6-year-old boy with autism and a 4-year-old girl. I'm basically a full-time housewife, taking care of the kids and doing everything around the house. I handle the cleaning, laundry, and groceries. My ex doesn't lift a finger at home. It's frustrating because he'll finish eating and just leave his plate on the table. We argued about it, and eventually he started putting it in the sink. On top of that, I work just as many hours as my ex, but I also take care of all the extra tasks. Thankfully, my parents understand the load I carry, so they help me out. My ex dislikes them, but he doesn't hesitate to use them and treat us like maids. He's from Pakistan, and I'm not. Things were great at the beginning, but over time, things changed. He refuses to do any housework. He never cleans and expects me to change his bedsheets once a week. He wants everything to be clean, including the bathroom, but he won't lift a finger to do it himself. His go-to phrase is always "we need to," which basically means you need to. Because of my son's condition, I want to work as much as possible to secure his future and cover the bills. Autism is an expensive medical condition, especially with the need for ABA therapy, which unfortunately isn't covered by insurance. Most of the expenses come out of our own pockets, including speech therapy and occupational therapy. While I'm working hard to earn what I can, I don't even buy lunch because I want to save every penny I can for my kids. I found out that my husband changed his schedule and started leaving right after I leave for work. This is a problem because our arrangement was that one of us would always be home for our son. Thankfully, my parents help out, but we had agreed on one of us being there. About a year ago, I discovered he was having an affair. Before finding out, I noticed changes in his behavior. He was always picking fights, being distant, and spending very little time at home. He couldn't even look at me or have a proper conversation. At one point, he suggested having a marriage in name only for the sake of the kids. He wanted us to be friends, but not husband and wife, while still being legally married. He would go out and come home just to sleep at night. Since my son has autism, he used to sleep with my ex, and he even tried to train my son to sleep on his own. Guess what? For a whole year, he was going out to an expensive hotel every week with a 403. He would buy her luxury items like a Burberry bag and even gave her money to buy appliances. I found out because he never locked his phone, but suddenly he started keeping it locked and on him at all times. He was constantly texting on it. Whenever I texted or called him, he wouldn't respond or answer at all. Anyway, he finally expressed his desire for a divorce because he wants to be with this Brazilian 403. And you know what's worse? She's already married and cheating on her husband. She doesn't even want to be with my ex, but she's encouraging him to leave me. What the heck is wrong with people? So now he wants a divorce and to leave me and our kids right after he deceived me into signing our house as collateral for a small business loan. I never saw it coming. I never ever imagined that something like this would happen to me. I ended up getting an STD from his cheating. But what can I do? Nothing. I hate myself for being so naive. I did the worst thing I could do. I swallowed my pride and begged him not to do it. The kids need us. I can't afford autism therapy on my own. He just continues to treat me however he feels like. He even threatened to take the kids away from me when I kicked him out of the house. I got scared. My kids are everything to me. I can't handle the emotional toll anymore. I had postpartum depression with both pregnancies, and the second one was even worse. I couldn't work for over a year. I took care of my daughter all by myself without any help from my ex. He was too busy taking care of my son. I love my kids. I am the only one who disciplines them because I love them. My ex wants their love, so he gives them whatever they want. Now my daughter doesn't want me anymore. She tells me she doesn't want me. She's just a child, but it hurts. I've had enough of the offense. I'm going to file for divorce. If he ends up taking the kids, then so be it. I feel beaten down. I did everything right. I worked hard, never took shortcuts, and remained faithful in my marriage, no matter how tough it got. Everything I do is for my family. I just wanted to share my story. It's crazy, but there are people out there who do unimaginable things.